This is a tough one. I know you can tell what game it is from the title of the video. But I feel like maybe this time I shouldn't have put it there. Because if you didn't know what this was, could you tell by the label? This is my copy of Elevator Action. We'll get to the Nintendo game in a second, but first I want to touch on the Game Boy game that came later. After this, at some point, I don't know, I have to check up on my dates, but there was a Game Boy game where they added additional weapons and more elaborate levels, and you could shoot the lights out. And they took this game and made it bigger and better and put it on the original Game Boy. That game I grew up with. I discovered that it was one of the games my older brother had. My older brother had one of those, the brick Game Boys, the DMGs. He saved up his allowance and he bought one when I was too young to really save up any kind of money. I didn't have any concept of how money worked or how to save it up or do anything like that. So he had a Game Boy early on, and I only remember playing a few games on his Game Boy. Elevator Action, Super Mario Land 1 and 2, and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and then Zelda, Link's Awakening. He had a lot of games, but for some reason those few were the only ones I remember. Elevator Action, I think, was my favorite. I don't know, maybe not. I just realized I'm putting it up against Link's Awakening. I don't think that's fair. But Elevator Action for the Game Boy was a great, great game. And a couple years later, I was really young when that happened, and then when I was a teenager, I started collecting Nintendo games. You know, before everything was $1 million on the internet. You've heard me tell this story before. I would go down to the pawn shops, and they would have these big stacks of Nintendo games, and they were all $5 no matter what they were. And I would just, I would come down there with enough money for one or maybe two games, and I would just buy what I could. And I did that every week. Well, one week I found this, and I only knew what this was at the time because I went with a friend of mine who was able to identify it. And I was like, yes, this is that Game Boy game, isn't it? For Nintendo. That means it'll be in color. Sweet. I was excited. So it's easy to look at this now and say, yes, this is a terrible copy. But you have to understand, in those days, I was so thrilled to get this awful copy of Elevator Action, and I still have it. It's one of the few surviving games I have from that time. There's better versions of Elevator Action out there. To this day, I still prefer the original Game Boy version. Game Boy game's great. And now I have a Sega Saturn, so I have the Japanese Sega Saturn version in the back of my head, which I'll never be able to afford. But here's the Nintendo version. I still have it after all this time. I haven't played it in a while. It would be kind of nice to fire up again. I don't know what it goes for these days. This is one of those games that, because I got it back then, I don't know what the market value is. Let's take a guess, all right? When I did Desert Commander, I guessed $10, and that was pretty close. That game turned out to be between 7 and 8. So I'm gonna guess that you can get Elevator Action for the Nintendo for about I'm gonna guess the same thing. I'm gonna say about $9, and I'm gonna look it up right now. It looks like if you were impatient, I'd say about $10. Is it worth $10? Get the Game Boy version, man. The Game Boy version is so good. It's so good. And I know that there was an Elevator Action for the PS3. I don't know what it was. I just feel like it didn't have the same magic. It was a fun game, and I think it's free as well, but didn't quite pull me in. Alright, gang. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.